Good afternoon, almost evening, on this wonderful April day, and I'm Shelley from Hanging by a Thin Thread. This is episode 55. I welcome you back to my deck. The weather is pleasant enough out right now that I can record out here, and this is probably going to be a brief episode because I'm trying to just give you a little touch base on what is going on in my knitting, weaving, spinning, crochet, and other fiber hobbies, kind of an update. The most recent thing I've been doing is, lately here, is motivating myself to attack my stash. And what I mean by that is to once again categorize and inventory the mainly right now the knitting and crochet yarns that I purchased and those that remain in my stash closet. I also have a lot of fiber, but I haven't yet started cataloging that. But I am in the middle of inventorying my stash and putting them into Ravelry. I'm actually photographing each one and putting it into Ravelry by project if it was designed for a project, or even by single skeins if I have the label on the skein. And what motivated me to do this is because I've been watching a few other podcasts and YouTube channels where they have been doing this, and it seems to only be a natural when you do your spring cleaning to take a look at your fiber closet and your yarn closet as well as your general household in decluttering. Now that I finally have my mother moved and she is enjoying the apartment that she is in now, we're getting it more and more, getting the pictures hung and all of that kind of thing to make it more homey. Now I'm turning my attention back again, once again, to making my own home more usable in my new retirement life. And so I've been turning my attention to how can I best use the resources I already have, which is my current yarn and fiber stash. And I've been watching several podcasts where this is a focus for them as well. The most helpful one so far has been one that I've recently discovered called Lost in the Wool. And she, like me, loves a woody environment. I have the woods in my backyard. And so she loves the woods, and she has been in the process of going through her stash and putting it on Ravelry, similar way I am. In fact, that's what's convinced me I really need to do that again, where I take photographs of each item and put it on there. Because even though it seems time-consuming, in the long run, I believe it's going to save me a lot of time and will help me better utilize my yarn. Because I have these 1970s closets in my 1970s house that we live in. And they're very narrow, and there's not a lot of depth to the closet. It's not the kind of thing where you could just install shelves and make it all nice and, ready for stash. And so it's the kind of closet that I end up putting things in either the totes or even project bags. And they get stacked in there. Instead of looking at them when I'm ready to start a new project, I will often, end up purchasing new yarn because I forget about what I already have in my stash. But I know that this works for me because back in 2009 and 10, I did this. I put everything I had in my stash onto Ravelry. I photographed it and found myself, having started that project in 2009 of inventorying everything, it really very much kept it top of mind. And so I ended up using that yarn. And by 2011, I used some of it in my rigid heddle weaving, but I would have it staring at me right in the face every time I logged on to Ravelry. I would see what I have in my stash, and that would motivate me then to go out to the closet and pick specific yarns for specific projects. And it would let me know that I had enough yardage for it because it would already be entered into Ravelry. So I could pair my items in my queue, my patterns I wanted to knit with the available yarn in my stash. And then at the very end, I had random stuff, and so I started doing the rigid heddle, making some charity shawl projects for prayer shawls. And so that used up what was left of my stash. So I really had it down to bare bones by the time I finished that project. I'm hoping, once again, doing that this time will do the same thing, that I will be motivated to better use what I have. Because not only do I get motivated by the yarns I have, after all, I picked them because I liked them originally. And so seeing what I have there really keeps me top of mind what I have available. So I'm going to be doing that. But I highly suggest, if you want motivation, there is this podcast that I'm going to link to by Kim, and she has a series specifically for destashing and inventorying your yarn, and she helps you match them up with pattern suggestions, specific pattern suggestions. Her name is Kim, Lost in the Wool, and she is a knitter and crocheter. So she can offer a variety of suggestions no matter what craft you do. I don't think she's a spinner, but she is an avid knitter and crocheter, and she's pretty prolific. So I like the fact that she provides ideas for little amounts of yarn as well as medium amounts and larger amounts. And that really inspired me to get started on doing this again. So for about the past week and a half to 2 weeks, I've been doing it very sporadically. I only do a few at a time. I don't want to get overwhelmed with it. So I'll do a few yarns, maybe 5 a day. I'll take out on my deck, photograph, put into Ravelry, and then go on to the next 5 or so. And, I'm making headway. Right now, I have to say my house, you wouldn't know that by looking at my house, because I have bags of yarn categorized and stashed in my dining room primarily, and a little bit in my living room as well. My husband keeps asking, what are all these bags? What's going on? And I'm explaining, I'm doing this destash, and eventually it's all going to be neatly put away back into the yarn room. But right now it's a little overwhelming when he looks at my yarn room being a mess and having these bags all around the house. But eventually it truly will make things easier for me and make this yarn much more available for projects. Let me know if you are in the process of inventorying or destashing. I don't really have a goal of destashing a whole lot because I do want to keep the yarn that I still love to use for projects. And so I'm not really in the process so much of destashing as organizing and making this yarn usable. And that's my intent. But let me know what you're doing. Are you truly destashing, or what is your process like right now? And are you in this mindset? And is entering these yarns into Ravelry something you would like to do, or is that just too much for you? Let me know if you have a method that you like and works well for you. In line with the destashing and inventorying, that mindset that I'm in right now, I do want to mention that I recently took a wonderful class. In fact, I took it Friday. There used to be called Mason-Dixon knitting, but it's now called Modern Daily Knitting, I think, MDK. And there's 2 friends who live in 2 different parts of the country. And I think one lives in New York and maybe one lives in Tennessee. But they had some books out a few years ago that I enjoyed. And so they've continued on with their website, and they've grown what they're doing. They put out not only like a daily newsletter or information each day, and they frequently will have guest knitters interviewing, and people like Patty Lyons and Franklin Habit, and different people will write columns for their Modern Daily Knitting. And I'm subscribed to it. They also, I think, now produce their own yarn. But at any rate, they are giving some classes by well-known fiber designers and artists. And I happen to, in the middle of this destashing and inventorying process that I'm in the middle of, I get a note in my email saying, hey, Park Williams, a well-known young designer, well, I don't know how well-known she is, but she is a designer I have knit one of her sweaters. and I'm going to put it up here, a picture. You guys probably remember this pink sweater I made because I wear it quite frequently. And especially this spring with the weather being up and down all the time, I found myself wearing it as an extra layer. And then sometimes in the afternoon it gets warm and I peel it off. But it's been a really comfortable sweater and one that I've frequently worn. And it's a pullover. So that is where I have been encountering Park Williams before. Park Williams. She is a Chicago-based knitter, and she has really, some great designs. Sometimes they're a little too cropped for me, so I make them longer. And like I said, the only one I've ever actually knit is the pullover she did. But I did make it a few inches longer because I didn't want it cropped like she has it. But it's really cute on her being cropped. But for me, I want it, to cover past my stomach. So I made mine longer. But at any rate, that's where I was familiar when I saw her name. I knew I liked her designs. And the fact that she apparently is a big believer in using scrappy yarns and projects and making, using up skeins in her own stash. So I signed up for the class, which was Friday. It was a 2-hour class, and I wasn't sure at first if she was going to be, how exactly she was going to propose using up the extra yarn. I didn't know if it was scrappy projects like, blankets, because there's a lot of scrappy blankets and afghans you can make. And there are also one technique that we did years ago, my mom and grandmother and I, we're really into what we called scrumbling or freeform knitting and crochet. This is a vest that I did. That was many years ago. I think this was around 2009. And you can see I made these scrumbles and then attached it, sewed it onto this vest I got at the thrift store. And so this is an example of how I used scrumbles at the time when I was trying to use up my stash. And my mom and my grandmother and I, all three, got involved in this. And we even my mom and I went to the Midwest Knitters Stitches Conference to take several freeform knitting classes at that time. It was a very popular technique to use up your scraps. So I didn't know if Parks was going to talk, if Park was going to talk about, that kind of scrappy knitting or what it would involve. But it turns out what it is mainly she is using marling and striping techniques to use up all different kinds of weights of yarn. So it has you can take your fingering and pair it with, a DK yarn. You can use 2 sock yarns and pair it with a fingering weight. 2 fingering weights and pair it with a DK. But you're aiming for kind of a heavy worsted weight project. And the one I picked was the Stashbuster Duster. That's one of her designs. She let us select one of her designs as part of the class that we could get to try out her technique. And so this one is, a long vest, basically. And I'm really excited to do this. But what we did was to pick out colors that we were going to use from our stash. And so I started with the base of this Ferris wheel pink marmalade yarn. I really like the colors in this. The pink, the purple, and the coppery brown. I thought that was an interesting combination. And always in the past when I have done freeform techniques like the vest, I found that taking a variegated skein of yarn and picking the colors within that skein was a good way to find colors that you would like and that you could wear together, that would go well together. And so I picked out some very vibrant pinks, and but I also had, a lot of these came from my old stash, deep stash, like this kind of funky textured trendsetter yarn that I had left, and some copper. Now that it's getting sunset, I don't know if you can tell the colors in this, but here's a nice brown coppery color. So that's an example of some I put together, and I did another bag of others where if I wanted to put the pink with a gray and a purple or even a lime green. So I made 2 different bags that I can pick from. But the yarn, what I found is, like I said, the best way to make sure things go together is to see if you can find a variegated skein of yarn as a central unifying point. And so that's what I find very successful in the past. And so this is my sample that I knit during the class. And you can see, or maybe you can't, but there's some sequiny yarns, and there's some pinks and some coppers and some purples. So this is what I created. She had us do a sample while we were in class, and that's what mine turned out like. I like the way it turned out. And I'm going to also do a sample of the pinks and the gray with some purple and maybe even some black, you know, to see how I like that combination. And whatever one I end up liking the best is what I will go with. But I really got inspired by her class, and like I said, her way of combining the yarn and using it is to take several strands. You can have up to 4 strands as you're knitting, and you knit them together. And so it makes different fabric. I'm going to put a picture up here of one of her sweaters that she was wearing, where she combined the different yarn colors and textures and made a beautiful watercolor-like effect. And then she had another sweater where she took a basic white neutral creamy yarn, and then she made stripes of her scraps. So either way, that's a more subtle way to do it. If you don't like a crazy looking sweater, you can definitely, depending on your own taste, make it very wearable. Whereas maybe in the past, my scrumbles, you know, I could wear this, and I did wear it at the time. At the time, I had my hair dyed red, kind of an auburn color, so I wore this fairly often at that time. But it's a little bit, you know, showy. So if you don't like that kind of thing, I also made a scrumbled purse. But I think the stuff that Park is talking about is going to be a lot more wearable for most of us that aren't as flamboyant as I am. I think having a more, you know, you can make a more wearable and conservative and neutral looking, whether it's a sweater or whatever it is. You don't just have to make afghans with your scraps. And another idea that I had found before that I thought was good was the Crazy Grandpa sweater. This is by Esther Sandroff. And I'm pretty sure this is a free pattern on Ravelry. But it's one for a long time that people were mentioning as a good scrappy project. So there are all kinds of, you know, you can basically take any basic pullover, cardigan, vest pattern that you want and turn it into one of these very creative and stash busting projects. The last thing I'm going to talk about today is, many of you who have heard me talk about my spinning know that I am really excited always about spinning Shetland. It's one of my favorite fibers that I spin. And in the past with the Tour de Fleece, I've made a point of spinning Shetland of different colors and trying out different combinations. But what I decided recently was when I heard there was a knit-along going on with the Wooly Thistle. They are a yarn shop in New Hampshire. I'm pretty sure it's New Hampshire. But they are owned, the shop is owned by someone from Scotland, and I think she's from the Shetland Island area. Corinne, I believe is her name. But they carry a lot of the Shetland yarns, the Jameson and Smith and all different brands of the Shetland seems to be their specialty. And so I got in on a knit-along that they were doing. You could knit whatever shawl you want, but I guess every spring they knit a shawl, and you don't have to pick any one particular shawl, but they inspire one another with the different shawls that they're working on. And I picked the Gundrun Johnston Hansel, which is a half-hap shawl. You can also do the full hap. But what it means is that the half-hap is basically a triangle, and the full hap is a rectangle. And so I decided to go with the half-hap, and this is my gauge swatch. I actually just had to go down one size on the gauge, to get gauge, I mean. And now I don't, oh, here it is. This is my part, I've just started it. But this is my Hansel half hap, the center part. You start with the center, and mine is in a charcoal color. This is a Jameson and Smith DK weight yarn. And yes, when I got this yarn, I ordered the kit from Wooly Thistle. And when I ordered this, I did immediately put this yarn in my stash. I do have it on Ravelry, cataloged already and photographed. But I decided to go with this charcoal. It's hard to see right now with the colors fading in the light. But I'm going to pair it with a contrast with this teal yarn, which I love. Teal is one of my favorite colors. And then a peachy, kind of a peachy rose color. It has tiny little flecks of kind of green and blue in it. And then the rose color, to me it's like a rose, a dark rose, is going to be a contrast also. And finally, this kind of aqua color. Those are going to be my 4 contrasts, and then the charcoal will be the main center part as well as the very edging at the end. So I will put up a picture here of what the Hansel half hap looks like. And I'm just really excited, not only to be working on this current shawl project, but also the kind of projects I'm going to do on my stash busting. I'm really inspired again. I was kind of in a slump a little bit toward the end of winter, and now I'm really excited again. And finally, my nose that I was telling you all about last time, I had that nose injury there from my skin cancer surgery, and it's healing very nicely. The skin graft did finally come off of it, and it's healing. So I'm much less self-conscious than I was when I had that, you know, that unsightly looking little thing happening there. But I'm really going to be using my sunscreen all the more this spring and summer, and sunglasses and a sun hat. Oh, I didn't see. I knew it had the Wooly Thistle on the front of the bag, but I didn't notice it says all knitting is good knitting. So I hope that you will let me know what projects you're working on, and are you doing any stash busting? Have you had any particular patterns that you would recommend as stash busting good projects? Do let me know down in the comments. And until next time, love what you're making and wear what you make. Goodbye, everyone.